No contact has become the go-to breakup advice everywhere you look. Friends suggest it, social media glorifies it, relationship coaches preach it like gospel. The idea is simple. By cutting someone off, no texts, no calls, no accidental likes, you reclaim your power. You show them what life without you feels like. And in theory, that absence is supposed to make them realize your worth. It's supposed to make them miss you, crave you, and maybe even come running back. But here's the hard truth. No contact doesn't always work. And when it doesn't, it can feel like the most painful, silent rejection of all. You follow all the rules, you go ghost, you don't break, you stay strong, and still nothing. No message, no I miss you, no sign that they're affected at all. It's like you disappeared and they didn't even flinch. That's when the self-doubt creeps in. You start asking yourself, did I even matter to them? Was I just that forgettable? Are they really over me already? And that's where most people crack. They assume the no contact failed and they rush back in with a text, a call, a desperate attempt to re-spark something. But the reality is this no contact isn't a magic spell. It doesn't work just because you vanished. It only works if your absence actually matters to the other person. Matthew Hussey, though often associated with empowering, positive messages, has hinted at this tougher side of relationship strategy. He said it before. The key isn't just disappearing. It's about what your absence does to their perception of you. If they already assumed you'd be waiting around, if they never valued your time, if they believe they've got you on an emotional leash, then your silence won't shake them. It'll only confirm their assumption that you're still there, just quieter. The effectiveness of no contact doesn't lie in the act itself. It lies in the emotional leverage behind it. If you didn't build strong emotional currency before going silent, then they may not even feel your absence. And that's the painful paradox. The more emotionally unavailable someone was toward the end, the less likely they are to notice when you go missing. That doesn't mean you weren't important. It means your silence alone isn't enough to shift their mindset. They don't feel the loss because they don't fear the loss. There's no pressure. No consequence, just space. That's why Hussey and other sharp-minded coaches often suggest something deeper. If you want no contact to work, it can't just be vanishing. It has to be paired with a transformation that echoes back to them. Think of it this way. Disappearing without changing anything in yourself is just hiding. But disappearing while evolving, that's when the mental game changes. When they scroll through social media and see a stronger version of you, more confident, more fulfilled, more magnetic, they don't just notice you're gone. They realize you're becoming someone they can no longer predict. And unpredictability is power. No contact then becomes more than silence. It becomes the beginning of a psychological shift where the person who once had your full emotional attention is left wondering what's changed and why. They begin to question whether the door they assumed was always open might be closing, and not because you're playing games, but because you're genuinely moving forward. That's when the weight of your absence starts to settle in. That's when they start to feel it, not just the silence, but the threat that your story with them might actually be done. So if no contact isn't working for you, don't assume it's broken. Ask yourself, does my absence carry weight? Have I created a space they feel or one they can ignore? Because the truth is, it's not just about walking away. It's about walking away in a way that makes them realize you might not be looking back. When people go into no contact, they often think the silence alone is enough to create impact. They assume that by cutting off communication, the other person will immediately start missing them, start reflecting, and maybe even come crawling back with a new sense of appreciation. But here's what most people don't realize. Silence is not inherently powerful. Silence only becomes powerful when it creates impact, when it makes the other person feel something. Without that, it's just empty space, forgettable, passive, easy to ignore. This is where Matthew Hussey's darker, more mentally strategic insight comes into play. He talks about this subtle but crucial shift, using absence not just as a withdrawal, but as an intentional act of contrast. When you go quiet, what are you really leaving behind? What mental residue are you placing in their mind? Because if the answer is not much, then your silence will likely fade into background noise. Think about it. People are flooded with distractions every day. Social media, dating apps, life drama, new people. Your silence has to compete with all of that. It has to stand out. And in order to do that, it needs to echo, not fade. That's why you need to make your absence felt, not just heard. You don't just disappear from the phone. You disappear with a message. That message doesn't have to be spoken. In fact, it's more powerful when it's not. It can be as subtle as a shift in your energy, your online presence, the vibe you project without ever directly interacting with them. That's the art of creating impactful absence. Your silence should spark curiosity, concern, doubt. They should be wondering, why are they so calm? Why do they seem like they're actually doing better without me? Why aren't they reaching out like I thought they would? This is where most people unintentionally mess it up. They go silent, but everything else about them screams desperation. They check their ex's stories. They post sad songs. They upload cryptic captions, hoping it'll get noticed. They pretend they're fine, but the effort behind the performance betrays them. Real emotional power doesn't look like that. Real emotional power is in the calm, controlled shift. It's in not flinching when they watch your stories. It's in posting a picture of you out with friends, not for them to see, but because you're genuinely having a good time. It's about rebuilding your energy so thoroughly that their attention becomes irrelevant to your progress. Matthew Hussey hints at this through his concept of making people feel your absence through progress. That means showing without ever saying that you're not just surviving the breakup, you're evolving from it. You're not just trying to get over them. You're becoming someone they no longer recognize and maybe can't reach anymore. That shift creates the emotional friction that makes silence stick. It gets in their head, not because you're trying to be cruel, but because you're finally prioritizing yourself in a way that's unapologetically visible. This kind of impact doesn't beg for attention, it commands it. The person starts to replay conversations in their head. They wonder what's going on behind your silence. And the more they wonder, the more your absence grows in their mind. That's how no contact works when it's done with intention. It's not passive. It's not about sitting in a corner waiting for them to miss you. It's about becoming so emotionally self-contained and elevated that they can't help but notice the space you once filled and the power you've reclaimed by not needing them to fill it again. So if you're going quiet, make it count. Don't just be gone, be missed. Don't just disappear. One of the most overlooked yet powerful tools in emotionally strategic detachment is the use of reverse psychology. Not in the cheesy, manipulative way that people sometimes imagine, but in the way you can use emotional cues to subtly influence how someone thinks about you, especially after a breakup. And this is something Matthew Hussey has alluded to repeatedly, even if he doesn't always call it by that name. The truth is, when someone pulls away from you, emotionally or physically. The last thing you want to do is chase. That instinct, while natural, is often what makes you forgettable, predictable, unmysterious. And people don't obsess over what's predictable. They obsess over what they can't expect. When you first go no contact, the assumption is that silence will create space for the other person to reflect. But often that reflection only happens if something disrupts the pattern they expect. If they expect you to fall apart, beg, or reach out eventually, and instead they're met with calm, confidence, and indifference, it creates an emotional contradiction. And contradiction is what sticks in the mind. When your behavior doesn't match their expectations, it creates cognitive dissonance. Suddenly, they're the ones wondering, wait, are they really lies? Because if you've gone silent, but they're still taking up 90% of your thoughts, your energy is still theirs. They still have you. And on a deeper level, they can feel that. Matthew Hussey touches on this in a more advanced sense, not just walking away, but detaching while still being visible. This is the true mind game. You don't have to erase yourself completely. You can still exist in the digital world, in mutual social circles, even in their peripheral awareness. But you exist differently. You're not seeking, you're not reacting, you're not even trying to prove a point. You're just there, evolving, detached. That kind of emotional distance does something psychological. When someone assumes you'll always be there emotionally, even if you're not speaking, it gives them a sense of control. They feel like I can always come back if I want to. But when you emotionally distance yourself, not in a cold, punishing way, but in a centered, self-owned way, they begin to feel the disconnect. The old emotional grip they had on you starts to slip, and that is what creates tension in their mind. It's not your silence that gets them, it's the feeling that even if they reached out now, they might not get the same version of you back. That's why emotional distance is more powerful than physical silence, because you're still visible, maybe through a post, a story, a mutual friend, but the energy is different. It's calm, neutral, unattached. They expect sadness, bitterness, or a silent plea for attention, and instead they see you moving on, not pretending to move on, not putting on a show, actually moving forward. That's when it hits. That's when the gravity of losing you becomes real. Hussey talks about how attraction isn't just about how someone looks or acts, it's about the emotional space they create. When you become someone who's no longer emotionally available to the person who once took your attention for granted, they begin to recalibrate how they see you. You're not predictable anymore. You're not emotionally accessible. You're different. And difference triggers curiosity. Curiosity triggers reflection. And sometimes, but you have to commit to it. Emotional distance doesn't mean pretending to not care. It means actually choosing your peace over your attachment. It means resisting the urge to accidentally show up online when you know they're watching. It means not tailoring your glow up for their gaze, but for your own damn life. And ironically, when you stop making it about them, they start to feel your absence in a way that matters. Because you're not just gone, you've moved. You don't even need them to feel guilty or miss you. The power lies in how free you feel when you're no longer anchored to the hope that they'll come back. That's the emotional distance. That turns the tables. That's when you stop being the one who was left behind and start being the one who walked into something better. Quietly, in the end, no contact might start with silence, but if it's not backed by emotional independence, it loses its edge. So don't just pull away, elevate, let them see you, let them feel the shift, but don't let them access you. Because once someone realizes they can't just return to the same version of you, that's when they start wishing they never left in the first place. There's this final truth that cuts deeper than most people want to admit. Sometimes the person you want back is incapable of seeing your value until it's too late. And that's not because they're evil or heartless. It's because they were never looking at you through the right lens to begin with. They saw comfort, convenience, familiarity, but not your worth. And when someone only sees you through the lens of how you serve them, they'll never understand what they lost until you stop showing up in that role. This is where Matthew Hussey's darker mental strategy takes a quiet, devastating turn. Not out of revenge, but out of liberation. You don't heal to prove anything to them. You don't evolve to be noticed. You do it to finally detach from the idea that your value needs to be realized by them in order to be real. That shift is everything. Because let's be honest, some people will never come back, not because you weren't enough, but because they never saw enough of you to begin with. And your silence, your absence, your inner growth, that's not a strategy to win them back. It's the proof that you never needed them to validate your glow in the first place. So yes, maybe no contact isn't working. Maybe they haven't called, haven't reached out, haven't shown any sign of missing you. That's painful. That's real. But here's the brutal beauty of this mindset. It's not your job to wake them up. It's your job to wake yourself up from the illusion that they were ever the source of your power. Once you start seeing them as just a part of your story, not the whole book, you reclaim your authorship. You stop writing chapters hoping they'll read them. You start writing them for you. Hussey often says that when someone doesn't come back, it's not always a loss. It's often a reveal of who they are, of what they're emotionally capable of how shallow their investment really was. That doesn't mean your connection was fake. It means you were giving more than they were ever ready to receive. And there's nothing empowering about trying to convince someone to love you better. You don't want them back just because the silence scared them. You want someone who sees you clearly without needing to lose you first. That's why the real game isn't about getting them back. It's about getting yourself back. That version of you that didn't second guess your worth, that didn't perform for love, that didn't wait for closure from someone who never gave clarity. The darker mental strategy isn't darkness at all. It's just depth. It's the depth of knowing your energy is sacred, that not everyone deserves access to you just because they once had it. Oh, that you're allowed to close the door without waiting for someone to knock. And if they do come back, if they finally wake up months later and realize what they lost, you'll be in a space where you no longer need them to. You might smile, nod, even have a conversation, but inside you'll know, I outgrew the version of myself that wanted you back. That's the full secure moment. Not when they miss you, but when you realize you don't miss them anymore. So maybe no contact didn't work in the traditional sense, but what if that wasn't the point? What if the real success is that you've become someone who no longer needs to chase closure, attention, or validation from someone who couldn't see your light when it was shining right in front of them? That's the strategy. Not to be wanted again, but to finally want yourself more than you ever wanted then.